Okay, Mark, two specific questions for this particular episode. One is about mounting from the offside, and the other one is about how you can set your horse up to be yarded by itself. Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better to provide positive training solutions for a happier horse world for all. I'm Jenny Langley.
And I'm Mark Langley.
So, Mark, when you're teaching at a clinic, and I've seen, there'll be about 10 horses that have come from all different places around, near and far, and they all get sort of yarded in different yards, sort of ready to have their lessons with you. But I see them all sorted out, and despite all of them not knowing any other horses at all before they got there, they all seem to be quite settled. What's your strategy when you're setting horses up in the yards?
Well, the interesting thing is a good problem-solving horse with a reasonable amount of confidence can sort of cope okay going to new environments for a certain amount of time, as long as there's certain things in that environment that it can sort of register that are kind of recognisable safeties. That could be you being there and being around them, feeding them and stuff like that, knowing that, I'm in a safe environment, there's other horses around. Trying to get troubled horses who are very needy to be on their own is always difficult, because those horses, especially like I say, for instance, an example might be an ex-race horse. It's had a very troubled life. Its existence has been one insecurity to the next insecurity and unsure about things. And so they get very kind of, I guess they like addictions, that they become more addicted to the places of safety and their food and the things where the horse that's beside them in the stable, because everything around them outside of that is so traumatic. So when they go back to their safe place, it's kind of like extra safe for them because it's the only thing that they can cling on to. So those horses really struggle going to new places. And when someone asks me, how do I set a horse up to take it to a new place? I'm like, well, what sort of horse have you got?
When you lead a horse off the float, when you're helping these people unload, they arrive at your clinic, you've never met their horse before. Is that when you're assessing if they're a troubled horse or a needy horse? And then you work out how you're going to yard them? Is it at that moment?
Well, as soon as they come off, they're looking and already calling for other horses, because they just see a horse and latch onto it or whatever. And if they look pretty troubled and they look like the sort of horse that's really kind of not coping coming off the float, then you're probably going to put them near another horse, because you can't just put them on their own looking at other horses in the distance and running up and down a fence and hoping that maybe over the night they're going to settle down. I try and...
Yeah.
If I have a clinic, I try and put horses at least beside each other if I can. At our clinics in Mudgee, like, we used to have a big enough paddock that we start pairing them up, so they had a pair and they'd come in and work, and then slowly by the end of the clinic you start separating them during the clinic when they were getting a bit more stable and they had a bit more education on them, and you can start to get their minds in the right mindset, so then you could start to sort of separate them and they didn't worry so much. But it's very hard to just kind of put a horse in a new environment. Some people just yard them on their own till they get over it, but that doesn't always work. I'd rather just kind of work within what the horse can cope with, and then sort of work with the horse, and then slowly figure out if we can do a graded exposure or something like that to help them. But usually with good education, the horses improve.
So you're finding that horses need to be with another horse when they're in a new environment. That's just one element that you can do that will just really help support them not be so needy and so anxious.
I'm only saying the horses that are going to need that, otherwise it's going to be too stressful for them. It's like most other horses, the more, as I said before, the more stable horses, they can come to a new environment and yard a little bit away from the other horses and be okay. They're not as needy. Sometimes they're a bit like, especially like, I remember when I one of our horses years ago took to a clinic, and she was a paddock mare, and I'd only just sort of started her, and she was pretty green, and I took her to a clinic, and she didn't want to bar of all the other horses, because I don't like you guys. You're not part of my herd, so go away. And if I was in the yard and someone put another horse in the same yard, she'd shoot away and didn't want it near, and she'd sort of almost protect me to say, oh, you know, this is my friend, and because she was used to a stable herd and she was a stable horse, you know, stable in the mind, I mean, and so she kind of knew what she liked, and she wasn't prepared to go and talk to other horses because, you know, she wasn't needy, so she had to get to know the horses before she was going to talk to them. So
That's
you know,
funny.
just yeah, it all really depends on the horse and how you know structure it to get them ready to go on their own. But in a lot of cases, sometimes it's easier just to take a horse off its dunghill. I actually better explain that because I was explaining that to some people today,
Yeah.
and like, what's dunghill? And I'm like, dunghill, and I'm like, don't know what that is. I'm like, oh, you're taking your horse away from home. Um, so basically, sometimes if you take your horse away from its comfortable place and you take it somewhere unfamiliar, so say for instance, the horse is used to a few horses at home, but it's an okay horse. It's not one of those super needy horses. If you take that horse away from the mob and take it somewhere completely new, because it's just processed in the new environment, it doesn't sort of think about the herd. Whereas if you take that horse and you walk it away from the herd, and the herd calls and they can see the herd over there, and it slowly gets further away from the herd, it actually feels like it's more of a conflict for that horse than actually just putting it in a float and removing it from the herd completely, like teleporting it somewhere else. So sometimes when you teleport a horse somewhere else, they tend to just end up in their new environment and start to go, oh, well, this is completely new. But because the other horses aren't there, or the horses aren't just slowly disappearing, they're not thinking about the other horses. They're just thinking about the new environment, and then they think about you, and they think about the food you give them, and they go, oh, right, this is where I am, I guess. And they're actually sometimes better than when you're trying to tear them off the herd.
Okay, so this question, we'll go to the question. It's from Kat from Australia, and she would love some ideas on how best to settle her horse up for success, being yarded alone in preparation for a clinic away. So her horses normally live in a herd of 8, just like you were really describing. She's split them recently into 2 herds just to kind of begin the process, but they're all comfortable and confident being led away from the property or on their own or being ridden. So it sounds like just what you were describing. They're fairly settled in themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, the chances are they're going to be reasonable, okay? Like I said before, you know, and sometimes they get involved in the new environment that they go into, so they sort of don't think about their other mates. And if they're a fairly confident horse, you can already lead away and ride away. The chance of them settling down and just like looking at another horse over there or being beside another new horse at a clinic, they're probably going to be okay. It's only the really, as I say, the really needy horses that have had a bad past that suffer really severely getting taken away. So if you've already got that established with your horses, it sounds like you're on the right path. Something you could do just to test them is just put them in a float. Like, you don't have to do it very long. You don't have to do it for a whole night, but you just take them up to a friend's house or somewhere, just another paddock somewhere, and just park them, put an electric fence up, have your lunch there, have a cup of tea and a barbecue, have your horse there, visit it a couple of times like you camped with your horse at just out on a trail ride. And you might go for just half a day and just monitor your horse, see how it goes. And your horse knows you're there, it knows the float's there, it knows if it knows you well enough, and you've got a reasonable connection with it. There's still this idea of, I have safety around me. The people that don't have a connection with their horses and their horses are actually frightened of them, that's when, even if they were half stable as a horse in their herd, they're unstable around humans and the owner. So they're the ones that'll have also separation anxiety. But if you've done a good job with, your horse likes you enough, it feels like it trusts you. As I said before, like when I took a horse to a clinic, she was more busy following me around going, this is my herd, you guys aren't. So I felt I could have sort of taken her anywhere and she was okay with me knowing that I was there. And if you set up your float and you set up a little fence and give her some hay and some water and you have your lunch and just test her out, and if she's kind of happy and you might walk away somewhere and come back and just so she knows that space and knows that you're around, then that's the sort of feeling she'll get at a clinic. So even if you did go to a clinic and there weren't any other horses close by that she can kind of mate up with overnight, she gets the idea of that feeling, or he or she gets the idea of that feeling of being away from the other horses, but also being in a familiar environment. So, you know, if the clinic environment was going to be a big sort of, you know, throw them in the deep end, you kind of make a familiar, like you don't take them to a clinic, but you make the yarding and turning up somewhere in a float and having the float nearby and your camp nearby something that they're familiar with. Then you're sort of setting it up for success. And yeah, it could be just a 2 or 3 hour float away and camp for a bit, and then turn into a bit of an overnight camp with your horse if you wanted to go like that before you take it to a completely like a clinic with lots of other horses and action around.
Okay, so that's setting your horse up to be put in a yard by itself. Now, can you talk us through how we can set a horse up to have us mount it on the offside? The question comes from Karen from Australia. She just had a complete knee replacement, so she needs to be able to get on from the offside. She'd like to know how she can train herself and also her horse to be able to do this.
Yeah, so everything we do in leading is on both sides, okay? So I noticed I did a leading challenge just as a clinic. I had a little young horse there that hadn't really been started properly, and I said, you know, he was still a bit green in leading, but good enough to show what I wanted to show. And it was, can you brush your horse, put a saddle blanket on your horse, and stand in the one spot? So what that entails is, and brush your horse all the way to the hip, down its legs and everything. So what that entails is you lead your horse into all the positions you would handle it from. And so just put your hobbles on, or your concrete boots, grab your lead rope and teach your horse to lead past you on both sides, and hold your brush in your hand and brush your whole horse from nose to toes without moving your feet. Okay, so if you can do that, that shows, you know, proves to you that your horse leads well enough and also can walk past you with full trust on both eyes, move past you. So some people can walk down their horse's side, but as soon as that horse moves its feet, it wants to kind of move the hip out, face up, and it gets nervous, especially on the nervous side. So if the nervous side happened to be the offside, when you go to mount it and it moves its feet or something, it gets nervous. But if you can do everything like that, stand still, lead your horse past on both sides, brush it all over, saddle it from both sides, girth it up from both sides, then you're pretty well there. And if you can do that without moving your feet, it shows how adjustable your horse is and how it can move around you very softly without any worry. Once that's done, you just maybe got to get bigger, wave your arms, get up above it a bit like with your arms, and see if it's okay on both eyes. And then pretty well all it's got to do is handle you pulling on the saddle and pulling on the stirrup. So the next thing I do is like I'll pull on the stirrup as I'm leading the horse around. So make it feel like it's a bit off balance, like I'm putting the foot on the stirrup and I'm pulling on the saddle quite a lot. I put all my weight on the saddle and kind of make them feel off balance and see if they can cope with it really well on both sides. So that if they can cope with the pulling and the body, the person, then you stand on a mounting block, lead the horse around a mounting block. Then you're above them. You can be right above them. Pretty well, then you just get on them. It's if they can do all that, then usually they're fine about mounting them from that side, and they're not too worried. It's just when you got them standing still and you just exposing them to you moving at a standstill, that's not going to work as well as moving them around. And yes, it's quite easy if you do good leading. If you drive your horses out all the time, then they're a bit more worried down the sides, and that's the problem with having that worry down the sides. Is if you fall off on one side, especially their nervous side, then sometimes you can't even put your hand out on that side because they've had a big fright from that side.
Yeah. I hope that helps, Karen, and I hope your knee isn't too sore and you can get back up on that horse and just jump in the saddle as easy as you'd like to be able to. Okay, thank you so much, Mark. We'll leave that there.
Yes. Yeah, no worries, Jenny. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
No, so what you were going to say.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, sorry, just on that, like it's a prerequisite to have your horse being able to be mounted on both sides, because I've seen many instances, especially when we're horse tracking on tight country and stuff like that, where you'd be on these trails and sometimes you just had to get on whatever side you could, and so everybody should be working on getting on from both sides. And what's also really important is, I think, and I'm in it. I have to sort of look at myself too and go, oh, you don't do that enough either. Is if you want to be really good for your horses, especially if you don't have a mounting block and you are mounting from the ground, it's good for your horse and your saddle to be getting on both sides. To just keep everything even. So technically, you should be doing 50-50. If you really want, and also, has anyone tried mounting on the offside? You'll find it's actually, to get your head around it, because you're so used to doing it a certain way, it's actually a little bit difficult, and even your leg won't stretch as much and stuff like that. So it is good to practice it just for yourself in your own mobility and dexterity. It's good to do it for your horse to keep them nice and even, and also for your saddle.
There you go. Some great tips. Thank you so much, Mark. Thanks for those questions from our members. If you're interested in that challenge that Mark was talking about, it is on the online training videos, all part of the membership that you get for just a little bit more than a couple of cups of coffee for a month worth of 800 videos. So it's well worth it. Thank you so much, Mark. We'll be back next week with some more questions for you. See you then.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jenny.
If you'd like to ask Mark your question and get his insights to help you and your horse, it's easy to join Mark Langley online. Head over to marklangley.com.au and hit join. It's less than a couple of coffees, and the Q&A is just a piece of a whole package designed to support you and your horse with great training.